Seoul, 9:47 a.m. 43rd floor, KJH Tower. The elevator doors opened to a corridor that smelled of power, polished marble, expensive leather, and the particular silence of a building that knew it was worth something. Amara Thompson stepped out wearing a tailored charcoal blazer, her natural hair pinned elegantly above her neck, small gold earrings catching the light. She carried nothing but a slim leather portfolio and the quiet confidence of a woman who had never needed to announce herself. She was here as a consultant, or so everyone believed. The assistant at the front desk barely looked up. Name: Amara Thompson. I have a 950 with the executive board. The young woman typed slowly, brows furrowing. I don't see a confirmed appointment here. Amara smiled, patient, practiced. Check again under Meridian Advisors. Another pause, a phone call made in hushed Korean, then a tight, apologetic smile, the kind that isn't really an apology at all. Please wait over there. Over there was a row of chairs near the elevator, not the lounge with the coffee and the floor-to-ceiling view of the Han River. The chairs. Amara sat, crossed her legs, and pulled out her phone. She had been underestimated in 4 countries across 2 continents. Seoul would not be her undoing. 7 minutes later, she was escorted into the boardroom. It was everything a boardroom should be, intimidating by architecture alone. A long glass table with 12 chairs, window walls facing the city. And at the far end, already standing, already speaking, already owning every molecule of oxygen in the room, Kang Yihan. She had seen photos. Photos did not prepare a person for Kang Yihan in the flesh. He was 40, but wore it like armor, sharp jaw, dark eyes with the particular stillness of a man who calculated everything. 6 feet of controlled authority in a navy suit that had not come off any rack. His voice was low and deliberate, the kind that rooms reorganized themselves around. He was mid-sentence when she entered, and he did not stop. He barely glanced at her. She took the only remaining seat, not at the table as she had expected, but along the side wall in one of the observer chairs. Someone had moved her place card. She noted it, said nothing. When Kang finally acknowledged her, it was not acknowledgement so much as a cataloging. The way a man looks at something that has appeared in his peripheral vision and has not yet decided if it matters. You are from Meridian, he said, in English that carried zero accommodation in its accent. Yes, Amara Thompson, lead strategic advisor. Something shifted in the room. Not much. A few exchanged glances between the Korean executives. She had seen this before too, the recalibration, the silent question of why her, why this, why here. Kang returned to his presentation, without another word to her. For 40 minutes she watched. She listened. He was brilliant, she would give him that without hesitation. His command of data, his precision, his way of disarming opposition before it could form. The board was not a group of men being led. They were men who had chosen, willingly, to follow. That was rarer. That was real power. But then the restructuring proposal came up. The third-quarter acquisition model. The one her firm had been quietly flagging concerns about for 6 weeks. The one that, if executed as drawn, would expose KJH Group to a structural liability that the board didn't yet fully understand. Amara leaned forward. If I may. We are not at the open floor portion. Kang said it without looking at her. Flat, final. She paused. I understand, but there's a miscalculation in the dilution model on slide 19 that affects the share. Ms. Thompson, he said her name the way people say words they have decided are not worth remembering. He turned to face her fully now, and the room contracted. Your firm was brought in for optics. This is not your area. Optics. The word landed like a slap that didn't touch her skin. She looked at him, directly, without flinching. May I ask what you mean by optics, Mr. Kang? The silence that followed was the kind that had texture. Meridian's involvement was a diplomatic gesture to your firm's international partners, he said smoothly, the way a man says something cruel when he has perfected the language of civility. The actual decisions here are made by people who understand the market. I'm sure your insights are valuable in other rooms. Other rooms. She heard it, Every man at that table heard it. The ones who had the grace to be ashamed looked away. The ones who didn't let small smiles rest at the corners of their mouths. Amara closed her portfolio, slowly, deliberately. "Of course," she said. "My apologies for the interruption." She said nothing else for the remainder of the meeting. When it ended and the room began to empty, one of the junior executives approached her near the door, young, maybe 30, something embarrassed living behind his eyes. "Ms. Thompson, I'm sorry about." "Don't apologize on his behalf," she said, not unkindly. "He'll do that himself eventually." The young man blinked. She walked out. In the elevator going down, she allowed herself exactly 4 seconds of something that was not quite anger and not quite satisfaction. A compound emotion she had developed over years of being the only one in rooms like that one. Then she took out her phone and dialed a number in Lagos. "Kofi," she said when he answered. "I need the full share register pulled, all the nominee structures, tonight." "Already," his voice was amused. "He called me optics." A pause, then Kofi laughed a deep, delighted sound. "Oh, he has no idea." "No," Amara agreed, watching Seoul rise around her through the glass elevator shaft. "He really doesn't." She hung up. Above her, on the 43rd floor, Kang Yihan was pouring himself coffee and feeling like a man who had just run an efficient meeting. He had no way of knowing, not yet, that the woman he had just dismissed from the table held, through 4 layers of offshore nominee structures, a silent equity position in KJH group equivalent to 23.4% of its total outstanding shares. Not a consultant. Not optics. Nearly an owner. And the board's next scheduled meeting, the one that would vote on the acquisition that he had just championed without correction, was in 11 days. Seoul, day 3 after the boardroom. Kang Yihan did not think about Amara Thompson. That was what he told himself on the morning of the 3rd day, standing at the floor-to-ceiling window of his penthouse apartment with a cup of black coffee and the kind of view that men spend their entire lives trying to earn. The Han River below caught the early light and threw it back in fragments. The city was already awake, already moving, already building toward something. He did not think about her. And yet, there had been a moment, brief, almost imperceptible, when she had looked at him across that boardroom table and had not flinched. Most people flinched. Not from fear exactly, but from the particular social gravity of his position, the accumulated weight of his name and his net worth and the 43 floors beneath his feet. People felt it. They adjusted. They softened their voices or straightened their spines or laughed a little too quickly. She had done none of those things. She had simply looked at him, and then she had closed her portfolio, slowly, deliberately, the way a person closes a door they intend to open again on their own terms, and said of course in a voice that meant nothing of the sort. He set down his coffee. It was nothing. She was nothing. A consultant from a firm whose involvement had been, as he correctly stated, a diplomatic courtesy. He had managed rooms full of brilliant, formidable people for 17 years. One woman with good posture and gold earrings was not going to occupy his morning. His phone buzzed. Young-ho, his chief legal officer. He answered immediately. "Tell me." "We have a problem." Young-ho's voice carried the particular frequency of a man who had spent a night not sleeping. "The share register audit. The one the regulatory board requested last quarter. We finally got the full picture back from the nominee analysis." Kang set down his cup, and there's a position we didn't fully account for. A series of offshore structures, Cayman, Luxembourg, a Singapore trust. When you trace them through to the beneficial owner, Young-ho paused, and that pause cost something. "It's significant, Yihan." "How significant?" 23.4%. The number landed in Kang's chest before his mind had processed it. He turned away from the window. "That's impossible. We know every major shareholder." "We knew every shareholder who wanted to be known." Another pause. "The beneficial owner isn't a fund, it's an individual." Silence. "Who?" Young-ho said the name. Kang stood very still for a long moment. Outside, Seoul continued its morning without him, indifferent and vast. "Say that again," he said quietly. "Amara Thompson, the woman from Meridian Advisors, the one who was in your boardroom 3 days ago." A beat. "The one you told was brought in for optics." He did not go to the office that morning. He sat instead with Young-ho and 2 other members of his legal team in a private meeting room in a hotel 6 blocks from KJH Tower, neutral ground. No staff who reported to him. No risk of the information moving before he was ready for it to move. The documents were spread across the table. 4 corporate structures, nominee directors in 3 jurisdictions. A Singapore trust established 8 years ago, long before KJH Group had become the company it was today, back when it was still climbing, still hungry, still the kind of company that took on silent investors to fund the ambition that the banks hadn't yet caught up to. He remembered those years. He remembered the capital that had arrived quietly, without ego, without demands. He remembered being told the investor wanted no seat at the table, no public acknowledgement, no involvement in operations. Only one condition, first right of refusal on any future share sale event. He had been grateful. He had been 32, and the money had been oxygen. He had never known who the investor was. "She built the position over time," Young-ho said, pointing to the transaction history. "Initial investment 8 years ago, subsequent purchases through the secondary market over 5 years, always through structures, always below the disclosure threshold per jurisdiction. By the time the aggregate hit reportable levels." "The structure was designed so it wouldn't," Kang said flatly. He was not reading the documents anymore. He was looking at a point somewhere past them. "She planned this from the beginning." "It's not illegal," Young-ho said carefully. "It's extraordinarily sophisticated, but it's entirely legal." "I know it's legal." His voice was quiet in the way that was more dangerous than volume. "What I want to know is what she wants." Nobody at the table had an answer for that. Because Amara Thompson, 23.4% beneficial owner of KJH Group, had not made a single demand, had not sent a legal letter, had not called a press contact or filed a regulatory disclosure or done any of the things a person did when they wanted to be known. She had simply walked into his boardroom, sat in the chair he had moved her to, listened to him call her optics, and walked out without a word. Her hotel, same morning, 11 a.m. Amara was on a video call with Kofi when the message came through. She held up one finger, wait, and read it. "Mr. Kang Yihan requests a private meeting at your earliest convenience. He is prepared to come to you." She read it twice. Then she set the phone face down on the table and looked out the window at the Seoul skyline, all glass and ambition stacked against a pale sky. "He is prepared to come to you." 3 days ago, she had been directed to the observer chairs. Today he was prepared to travel 6 blocks to sit across from her. She understood power well enough to know this. The geography of a meeting told you everything about who needed what. She picked the phone back up. "Tell him Thursday," she said to Kofi. "Here, 10 a.m. "Not sooner?" Kofi asked. "No," she almost smiled. "Let him think for a few more days." Thursday, 9:58 a.m. Kang Yihan arrived 2 minutes early, which was itself a statement. A man of his position did not arrive early to anything. He wore charcoal today, no tie, which told her he had decided against formality and chosen something that read as control without stiffness. He had thought about this meeting. He had dressed for it deliberately. She noticed all of it and said nothing. The hotel suite had a sitting area by the window. She gestured to the chair across from her. He sat. His eyes moved over her once, not the dismissive catalog of the boardroom, but something different, something recalibrating. "Ms. Thompson," he began. "Amara," she said. "We're past titles, I think." Something moved across his face. "Amara," he said her name like a man testing the weight of something new. "I owe you an apology." She tilted her head slightly. "For which part?" He looked at her. "You know which part. I want to hear you say it." A long pause. Kang Yihan, who had never in his professional life been required to retrace his own words, sat with the discomfort of that requirement and, to his credit, did not look away. "I called you a diplomatic gesture," he said. "I told you the real decisions were made by people who understood the market. I implied that you were in that room as a symbol rather than as a professional." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I was wrong, and he paused again. "I was dismissive in a way that I am not proud of." Amara studied him for a long moment. The apology was real. She was good at detecting the difference. "Why did you do it?" she asked. He frowned slightly. "I've asked myself that." "And?" "Because you walked in and the room shifted," he said, and the honesty of it seemed to surprise even him. "And I didn't like that, I noticed." The air between them changed. Subtle, molecular. Something that neither of them reached for yet because the professional wreckage was still too fresh, and because both of them were, at their core, people who did not move toward things carelessly. But it was there. "The acquisition proposal," Amara said, redirecting them both with the precision of someone who knew exactly when to close a door. "The slide 19 error. Do you want to know what I saw?" He leaned forward. "Tell me." She opened her portfolio. And for the first time, Kang Yihan listened to Amara Thompson, the way a man listens when he understands he is in the presence of someone who knows more than him, not with ego, and not with ease, but with the particular attention of a person who has just discovered the cost of not listening. The meeting lasted 3 hours. When it ended, he stood to leave and paused at the door. "The acquisition would have cost us $400 million in dilution liability," he said, not a question. "Closer to 450, she said, "once you account for the secondary trigger clause." He looked at her for a moment, really looked, the way he hadn't allowed himself to in the boardroom. "Thursday next week," he said. "Dinner, not a meeting. I want to understand how you built the position. I want to understand you." Amara closed her portfolio. "I'll think about it," she said. She did not tell him she had already decided yes. Some information, she had learned, was best held quietly. But what neither of them knew yet was that someone else had seen the nominee documents before Young-ho had, and that person had already made a phone call. A phone call that would change everything. Seoul, Tuesday, 5 days before the board vote. The phone call that changed everything had been made by Park Sung-jin, Kang's oldest board member. 67 years old, silver-haired, the kind of man who smiled at you while counting the ways you could be removed. He had been with KJH Group since its second year, back when it was still small enough to be shaped by individual hands. Back when a young Kang Yihan had needed mentors and had not yet learned to distinguish between the men who believed in him and the men who believed in what he could make them worth. Park Sung-jin had found the leaked summary of the nominee analysis on a Tuesday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, he had called 3 other board members. By Wednesday evening, an emergency motion had been quietly drafted, one that would force a special shareholder disclosure vote before Thursday's dinner, before Amara could consolidate any formal position, before Kang could do whatever it was he seemed to be doing with the African consultant who, it now turned out, was not a consultant at all. The motion was elegant in its cruelty. It would require all beneficial shareholders above 15% to publicly declare their strategic intent within 72 hours, or forfeit their voting rights pending a full regulatory review. It was legal. Barely. And it was designed to do one thing: force Amara Thompson into the open before she was ready, strip her of the careful architecture of silence she had built over 8 years, and make her position look hostile rather than what it actually was. Park Sung-jin did not know what it actually was. Neither yet did Kang. Thursday, 7:45 p.m. a restaurant in Itaewon. Amara had chosen the restaurant herself, not the kind of place Kang would have chosen, which was exactly the point. No private rooms, no velvet ropes, no staff trained to disappear. Just good food, warm light, the sound of a city that did not know or care who they were. She was already seated when he arrived, wearing deep burgundy that made her warm brown skin luminous, her hair down tonight, falling in soft coils around her shoulders. She looked like herself, fully, unapologetically, in a way that she had learned was its own form of authority. He stopped when he saw her. Just for a moment, the pause of a man who had prepared himself and found that preparation insufficient. He sat down, he looked at her. He said, "You look," and then stopped, as though the word he had reached for was too large for the space between them. "Hungry," she offered. He laughed. It was unguarded, unexpected, the laugh of the man underneath the 43 floors, and she filed it away carefully, the way she filed away everything that mattered. They ordered, they talked, and for the first hour it was, surprisingly, easy. Two extraordinarily intelligent people who had each spent their lives in rooms that underestimated them, discovering the specific pleasure of not being underestimated by each other. He told her about building KJH from a single failing logistics firm his father had left behind like an apology. She told him about Lagos, about the trading floor at 24 where she had been the only woman and had finished the year as the top performer and had been given a certificate instead of a promotion. "A certificate," he repeated. "Framed," she said, "with my name spelled incorrectly." He shook his head slowly, and then quietly, "I did the same thing to you, in that boardroom." She met his eyes. "Yes, you did. I have been thinking about it every day since." "Good," she said without cruelty. "You should." He nodded, accepted it, did not deflect or diminish, and that, the simple, uncomplicated accountability of it, moved something in her chest that she had not given anyone permission to move in a very long time. "Why KJH?" he asked then. 8 years ago, you could have placed that capital anywhere. Your portfolio, I've had people looking. You had options. Better returns, lower risk, more transparent structures. Why us? Amara set down her glass. This was the question. The one she had known was coming. The one she had rehearsed and re-rehearsed for 8 years and now, sitting across from him in warm Itiwan light, found she did not want to give the rehearsed answer to. "Do you remember a company called Bridgepoint Commodities?" she asked. Something moved behind his eyes. "Yes." They were trying to acquire a controlling stake in a small Korean logistics firm in 2016. The firm had one asset worth protecting, a proprietary routing algorithm that, if Bridgepoint absorbed it, would have been dissolved into their existing system and lost. The founder of that firm was 32 years old and had no idea what he actually had. Kang had gone very still. "I was working with an investment collective in Lagos at the time," Amara continued, her voice steady and warm and careful. "We had been tracking Bridgepoint for 2 years. They had a pattern of acquiring technology assets in emerging markets and stripping them. 17 companies in 6 years. The people who built those companies walked away with enough to feel grateful and not enough to feel whole." She paused. "I didn't want that to happen to your algorithm, or to you." The silence at the table had a different quality now, full rather than empty. "You blocked Bridgepoint," Kang said slowly. It was not quite a question. "The capital injection that came in that year, the one that gave us enough runway to refuse their offer, was mine," she said simply. He looked at her for a long time. "You saved my company." "I protected an asset I believed in." "You saved my company," he said again, softer, "and I put you in the observer chairs." She did not let him spiral into it. Yihan, his name in her mouth, for the first time without the formality of Mr. He looked up. "I didn't come to Seoul for an apology. I didn't build that position to punish you or expose you or take anything from you." She leaned forward slightly. "I came because of the acquisition proposal. Because I have watched you build something extraordinary for 8 years from a distance, and I was watching you walk it toward a mistake that would cost you 450 million and 2 years of momentum. And I wanted to be in the room when it happened, so I could stop it." "Why didn't you just call me?" he asked. "Why the theater, the consultant cover, the—" "Because I wanted to see," she said, "who you were in the room before you knew who I was." Another silence, this one long enough that the waiter came and refilled their glasses and retreated without a word. "And," Kang asked quietly, "what did you see?" Amara tilted her head. I saw a man who is brilliant and fearless and completely unaware that his greatest weakness is how quickly he decides what a room deserves from him. She held his gaze. You decided I deserved nothing before I had finished crossing the threshold. And you were wrong. And the version of you that is capable of sitting here tonight and admitting that is the version that built something worth protecting. Kang Yihan, who had faced hostile board members, hostile regulators, hostile markets, felt something he could not name moving through him, something that rearranged furniture inside his chest. His phone buzzed. He ignored it. It buzzed again and again. He glanced down. Young-ho, 6 missed calls. He excused himself. He was back in 4 minutes, and the expression on his face had changed completely. Park Sung-jin filed the motion an hour ago, he said. The board forced an emergency disclosure vote. You have 72 hours to declare your strategic intent or your voting rights are suspended pending review. His jaw was tight. I didn't know. I want you to know that I did not. I know, she said calmly. He stared. You know. I was told this morning. One of my legal team picked it up from the regulatory filing system. She was completely composed. I've been waiting to see if you knew. You were testing me again. I was giving you the chance to tell me yourself. He sat back down, looked at her across the table with something that was equal parts frustration and fascination. You are the most deliberately patient person I have ever encountered in my life. Patient isn't the right word, she said. I simply know the difference between a problem and a process. Park Sung-jin is a process. He wants to force you into a hostile position before the board vote. I know what he wants. Amara, her name now came from somewhere different in him, lower, more careful, like something he was learning to carry correctly. What do you want from this, from the position, from, he stopped, restarted, from any of this? She was quiet for a moment. Outside, Seoul moved in its brilliant, relentless way. A seat at the table, she said. A real one, not the observer chairs. She paused. A company that does not make the mistake it was about to make. And perhaps, the smallest smile appeared at the corner of her mouth, a dinner where someone does not call me optics before the appetizers. He laughed again, that unguarded laugh. And then his expression settled into something serious and open and new. I'm going to call an emergency session tomorrow morning, he said. I'm going to table the acquisition proposal myself and present the corrected dilution analysis. And I'm going to recommend to the board that your position be formally recognized, not because I have to, but because you have been the most significant stakeholder in this company for 8 years, and you deserve to be in the room as yourself. He held her gaze. Will you let me do that? Amara looked at him for a long moment. This tall, fearless, brilliant, flawed, presently very earnest man who had called her optics, and was now asking for the chance to correct the architecture of an entire relationship from the foundation upward. Yes, she said, but Yihan. I know, he said. I still have to earn it. You're learning fast, she said. 6 weeks later, the acquisition proposal was formally withdrawn. The corrected analysis saved KJH Group an estimated $460 million in deferred liability. Park Sung-jin resigned quietly before the vote could go against him. Amara Thompson was formally recognized as the company's second-largest individual shareholder and offered a seat on the advisory board, which she accepted, with conditions she wrote herself, in language so precise that Young-ho read them twice, and then said, quietly, she's better than our lawyers. She was. She kept her office in Lagos. She kept her portfolio. She kept her own name on her own terms. But she also kept a standing Thursday dinner in Seoul, in a restaurant in Itaewon where the light was warm and the staff had learned not to disturb them. Kang Yihan learned 3 things that year that no boardroom had ever taught him. That power announced itself most clearly in silence. That the most dangerous person in any room was the one who did not need you to know they were dangerous. And that the cost of dismissing someone before you understood them could be paid in ways that had nothing to do with money. He learned them from a woman with warm brown skin and gold earrings who had saved his company before he knew her name and had walked into his boardroom anyway, sat in the chair he had moved her to, and waited with the patience of someone who already knew how the story ended. She had simply wanted to see who he would choose to be. In the end, he had chosen well. Some people enter your life as consultants. Some enter as shareholders. The rarest ones enter as both and leave as something your boardroom was never designed to hold, but your life had always needed.